Hey there, welcome back to the DFS Build NFL edition, where we are going to break down the Week 3 Thursday Night Football game between the Jets and the Patriots. This game is ugly. It has a 37.5 point total. The Jets are at home, and they are favored because, well, they're facing the Patriots. So, unfortunately, couldn't get a showdown contest video in for Monday Night Football. As you can tell by my voice, was a bit under the weather yesterday, so it's out of commission, but I'm going to punch this video out now so we can get a head start on the Thursday Night Football slate. If this helps you at all, please give it a like. That helps me out quite a bit. And then also subscribe to the channel. Both those things help me know that I'm doing something right. Same with Taylor Smith when he's in these videos with me. Lets us know that we're, giving you some good advice and helping you win and all that stuff. And by the way, if you have any other questions as we go forward through the week or lead into a slate, feel free to comment on YouTube. I'll also be pushing out some YouTube shorts and even pushing some stuff on TikTok, just so we can do more, granular stuff where we kind of focus on individual plays and not just full slate breakdowns. But here we are looking at the showdown slate for Thursday Night Football, and we're going to look at the top plays we want to go with. Right now we're using Roto Grinders ownership and projections. No surprises up top. Breece Hall is the most expensive play, and he's got the best projection. And he also has monster ownership in the captain slot. So the way I like to break down these things and look at the slate is really to start from the captain slot and then kind of work my way out. So, Breece Hall is a monster. He's the most expensive guy for a reason. He's the most owned player in this game for a reason. He has the best ceiling, best floor. So no qualms with the ownership whatsoever. But per usual, when I play showdown slates, I do want to look for a way to get different. I think obviously the best way to do that right away is to slide Breece Hall over to my flex in a good chunk of my lineups and just use anybody else at this point, because you're just automatically going to get different from like half the field. I would not be shocked if that ownership in the captain slot is even higher. Also, by the way, this is a low scoring game for two reasons. Both these defenses are pretty good. Jets defense has struggled against the run so far. We saw Jordan Mason just eat them alive in week 1. And then Tony Pollard was also pretty successful last week. So remains to be seen if they clean that up at all. I would imagine if they're going to, this would probably be a get right spot for them defensively. They're facing Jacoby Brissett, who obviously does not strike fear into the heart of any defense. And then obviously Rhamondre Stevenson has been good, but if he was going to run into a brick wall, this could be the spot where the Jets kind of rise up and actually flex a little bit of muscle on the ground. Anyways, let's calibrate for 1 second here. Just look at Breece Hall. Obviously, I like him a lot. If I'm doing a single entry, I would absolutely entertain just eating the chalk and getting different elsewhere. The ownership is pretty staggering. So for the most part, I would probably be looking to be a little bit underweight and slide him over to the flex. But I want to roster him in probably most of my lineups. And if you want to slide him into captain, I would still have some exposure to him in captain for sure. But if you want to go overweight on him in captain and just say, he's the best play, don't really give a crap about the ownership, and I'll get different elsewhere, totally fine with that. I don't have a qualm with that whatsoever. The next highest owned captain right now is going to be Alan Lazard. And the reason is because he's pretty cheap at 8.7K. I don't really love him in the captain just because look at the discrepancy from week 1 to week 2. So week 1, he had 9 targets, 6 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. The second touchdown came in major garbage time with Tyrod Taylor throwing the ball. You could argue the first touchdown came in garbage time because the Jets were getting smoked. And then Rodgers had a beautiful ball over the top. I think it was like a 50-yard play or something like that for a touchdown to Lazard. So obviously there's the connection there. Lazard's going to be out there and playing. But then last week, he only had 2 catches for 11 yards on 4 targets and no score. So he was a pretty chalky play on the main slate in DraftKings, and I was very hesitant to buy into that. I said, okay, yeah, he's 3.3K. He's coming off of a big week. And to that point, they were kind of hesitant to roll Mike Williams out there a lot. That changed because Mike Williams played 65% of the snaps last week. So I think because he's one of Rodgers' guys, he'll still be out there a good deal. And I think based off of his price in the flex, I'm okay with him in the flex at 5.8. I'm okay with that, but his price has come up quite a bit from where it was. He was like 2K flat for the captain in week 1. So that's changed. I'm not quite as interested in him as the field. So I will absolutely take a stand there and be underweight on Lazard in the captain. 17% ownership for Lazard in the captain. It's not like he's super cheap here. So, I mean, he's not expensive, but 8.7 is getting a little bit high if I'm taking a punt on a guy that I feel at this point is going to be at best pretty volatile. So, I mean, I would rather pay up $600 and take a shot on Mike Williams, who is coming in at way less ownership. Mike Williams did not do much in week 2, but we know he's a big target. So, red zone, touchdown scoring ability is there. And he's going to only play more. So if he already was at 65% of the snaps last week, he could push for 70 or 80 this week, which would only hurt Lazard. So can you play Lazard? Yes. I just prefer to use him in the flex if I'm going to play him. And if I'm going to look at the captain slot at that price range, I am looking at Mike Williams for sure at 9.3K. You could even captain the Jets defense at 8.1. I mean, we'll get to other options too, but my point is if he's going to be that owned, I mean, I'm okay with eating the Breece chalk just because he's the best play on the board probably, but eating Lazard chalk feels gross to me. So I'm going to take a stand there and not do that, but you can play him in the flex if you want. I mean, really, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to listen to me in regards to every single opinion I have on a slate. That's just how I feel and what I'm doing this week. Next up, third highest owned player is Garrett Wilson for good reason. Garrett Wilson has not popped off yet. And the funny thing is he's had 12 and 10 fantasy points over his first 2 games, but just no touchdowns, no really big plays. So eventually, obviously, that connection between him and Rodgers is just going to blow up. 11 targets week 1, came down a bit, 6 targets last week. He wasn't really needed as much, and the Jets kind of played it safe. I don't think Rodgers had any passes beyond 10 yards down the field. So they're just kind of letting him manage the games right now as he kind of like shakes off the rust and the Jets kind of figure out who they are. But if he's going to be a third highest owned guy, sliding Breece to the flex and captaining Garrett Wilson at 12% ownership is very appealing. It's not really the greatest matchup based off of how the Patriots and Jets have been playing. They're going to be playing kind of slower. And then obviously you just have the low total in general. So it doesn't really give much wiggle room to a very explosive outing. That said, the Patriots are actually only 27th against the pass. Let's see. They're actually 4th worst against fantasy receivers so far. So I mean, like last week they faced Seattle, and Seattle JSN had a huge game. DK Metcalf had a huge game. So honestly, I think Garrett Wilson's an awesome play. I think he's just a great pivot off of this Lazard and Breece Hall ownership and the captain. So I think based off of ownership, based off of matchup, and based off of just potential and ceiling, I think Garrett Wilson stands out as my favorite captain play on the board. And if I can get Garrett Wilson at 12% ownership or less, I'm going to feel really good about that. So right away, you're getting different. He's still a chalky-ish option for a showdown slate. Anything over 10% is considered chalky, but that is, in my opinion, that would be good chalk. And 4th in ownership, the only other guy projecting for over 10% ownership at the moment is going to be Rhamondre Stevenson for good reason, because he's been really good so far. Massive role. 21 plus carries in each of his first 2 games, 23 plus touches in each of his first 2 games. He did give way to quite a few touches by Antonio Gibson last week. But obviously his role is pretty cemented. He is locked in. And here's the thing. The Jets have not been good against the run. They rank 24th against the run on the year, and against fantasy running backs, they are, let's see, bottom 10, I think. Just about, yeah. So it hasn't been great. They're giving up 24 fantasy points per game against running backs. Obviously, a lot of that damage came against the 49ers in week 1 when they were just getting crushed by Kyle Shanahan's system. So it depends. Do you really want to keep buying into that now going into a game where they're at home and favored? I don't know. So I don't really want to captain Stevenson. I like the fact that, number 1, we know he's got a pretty safe role. Number 2, even if they are losing, which they probably will be, he's probably going to get dump offs, and he's always a threat to score. And he showed last week he had a 59-yard run. It got called back, but still, I mean, he's still a pretty explosive player, kind of underrated in that regard. And you get him at 10% ownership in the captain, so I'm okay with it. But if I'm going to use Stevenson, I'm probably going to slide him over to the flex. Moving on here. Now we get to the point where like ownership doesn't matter. Now we're just looking at guys like, do we feel comfortable about throwing these guys in the captain? I think based off of the numbers the Patriots have shown against the pass so far, I think you can consider Aaron Rodgers in the captain. I just don't think the ceiling is really there. So I'm probably personally going to reserve Rodgers for the flex. I think if you're captaining Garrett Wilson or Lazard or any other Jets player, I think Rodgers is probably a guy that should be pretty high in the pecking order for you. But obviously it might not be the most ideal setting based off the game total. And through 2 weeks, he has not topped 15.1 fantasy points. So like I said, shaking off rust. Week 1 was a blowout. He didn't even finish the game. They're all just starting to figure it out and click. I think they've shown flashes, so this could easily be a blow-up game. But it also is, it could be a slower pace game on a short week. So it's tough to know exactly what to expect. So Rodgers can be in the captain, especially since he's not going to garner any ownership, apparently. But I prefer him in the flex. As far as other guys that we can look at, I mean, here's the thing. The Jets defense is coming in at almost 2% ownership in the captain. Obviously, that's nothing. Look at it. I kind of want to look over to the flex real quick to see what their ownership is looking like in the flex. Let's see. It's not really giving me any difference here. So maybe it's possible we can't trust these ownership numbers this early in the week. But so far, they do make sense. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, so no, I think we're only getting this ownership probably can't be fully trusted. It looks like it's only captain ownership that we can trust at the moment. Even that, we're probably going to have to, if we're setting our lineups this early in the week, we're just going to have to take a second look and make sure the ownership is actually something we can trust. That being said, so far it all does make sense. Breece Hall is going to be the chalkiest captain, even though he's expensive. And then Lazard is cheap and he's got a role, so he makes sense to carry some ownership. I would not be shocked if that ownership did end up getting split in half, though. And like I said, I don't really want him either way in the captain. And Garrett Wilson's ownership could go up, but as long as it's below Breece Hall, I think that's an interesting leverage spot. So nobody else really calls to me. Like let's look down the line here, though. Like Jacoby Brissett is the quarterback for the Patriots. He's going to be out there. It's not a good matchup, but he's going to be out there the whole game. So you never know. I think he's viable in captain. He's a fine flex play. I'm not like super excited to go race to play Patriots players at all. I'm going to be very Jets heavy in this game. I did mention the Jets defense. We don't have actual ownership on them, but this is a pretty good spot to fire up the Jets defense. The only issue is with the low game total and the Patriots not being like a super trustworthy offense. Will they garner like a ton of ownership? Very possible, but I just feel like this is probably a smash spot for the Jets defense to get it going. So you could captain the Jets defense if you really want to buy into the low game total thing. I'm probably just going to really go Jets offense heavy and then also consider sliding in a good amount of Jets defense plays in the flex. Based off of the game total and just like, the Jets offense not really blowing up to this point, you can also entertain the Patriots in the flex. I wouldn't really captain them. I think as far as probably low owned captains that we can at least consider. I mean, okay, let's go. Hunter Henry had 12 targets and 8 catches last week. So if that's going to continue, I think we can consider Henry. I think he's a better flex play just because he doesn't have like a very high ceiling. And the Jets pass defense in general is pretty good. They're a middle of the road team so far against tight ends, but I don't really anticipate Henry blowing up like that for a second game in a row. And he's kind of expensive, so I wouldn't really want to captain him, even though he'll be very low owned there. But I think in the flex spot, he's okay. Same with Mike Williams. I think he is an interesting captain play because he will not be owned in the captain, and all the Jets ownership is pretty concentrated. It goes Hall, Garrett, Rodgers. So he won't be owned. So if he plays 65% last week, he's going to play more. It's actually a pretty good matchup by the numbers. So Mike Williams in the captain is pretty appealing. I do like him. I'd definitely be overweight on him in the captain, and I'd have interest in him in the flex as well. I like him way more than I like Lazard this week. Another really interesting play that I don't know. He's not going to be. I don't think he's going to be like unowned in the flex. Would be Braylon Allen. He's had a role to start his rookie year. He only had 2 touches in week 1, but he kind of blew up last week with 2 touchdowns on 9 touches. He had 11 total opportunities. So I don't see why they would start scaling his workload back. I mean, obviously they have an amazing weapon in Breece Hall, but why not use both these guys if I were them, I wouldn't give a crap about fantasy. I would just use both these really good running backs. So I think he's an interesting flex play or captain play at pretty much no ownership. But he isn't exactly cheap to do that. 7.8K. I think it's fine. I think if you're running 150 lineups in, like a whatever, 10 cent, $1 quarter, whatever the contest may be, I would definitely get some ownership going towards Braylon in captain, and I do like him in flex as well. This is a game where we can entertain the kickers. Greg Zierlein, Joey Sly. I don't have a problem with either of them. Certainly a spot where we could see a lot of field goals, probably not a lot of extra points, but I can see either kicker getting 2, 3, maybe even 4 field goals in this game. So both are in play. You can play both of them. Obviously, I like the Jets offense a little bit better, so I would go with Legatron over Sly, but both are options. Demario Douglas, not feeling great about him. Antonio Gibson is an interesting value. Probably prefer him in the flex, but hey, if they are losing this game and he ends up getting, passing game work over Stevenson for some reason, then he looks pretty interesting. 5.4K in the flex, even cheaper, or in the captain, even cheaper in the flex. So Gibson is absolutely on my radar. He had 12 total touches last week, was pretty explosive as a runner with a 45-yard run. So he looks good. I don't have a problem with him at all. I think what you do with him is going to depend on how you think this game is going to go and what you want to do with Stevenson. So if you think Stevenson is like a major priority, then I wouldn't roster Gibson with him. But if you think this game is going to get out of hand and the Patriots are going to be behind, then it's a little bit more likely that Gibson is going to be rotated in and maybe get some passing down work too. So I think at that point, Gibson would look pretty interesting. And, just to get different too. In lineups that you're not playing Stevenson, I'd entertain using Gibson. Tyler Conklin is in play. Not a big role, but he's in play. I think he's a solid flex play. Just not a real ceiling, so I don't like him for captain. KJ Osborne, just the Patriots are just playing a lot of different guys. Jalen Polk, 3 targets last week and a touchdown. I think he's an okay value. I think I prefer him in flex for sure, but he's an okay captain shot if he's going to get playing time. Austin Hooper for the Patriots. He's back up behind Hunter Henry. Okay flex punt. Not feeling that for captain. Xavier Gibson doesn't really get much work on offense, but he usually is the return guy for the Jets. So if you're playing the Jets defense, you could maybe bank on a return and kind of pair them together. I think that's okay, but not really anything I'm super excited to do. Again, flex, not captain. Tyquan Thornton had a little bit of a role in week 1, and he had no targets last week. He only played half the snaps in an overtime game, so that's never something you want to see. Again, not a captain play, but I think if you want to take a punt on Thornton in the flex, there's nothing wrong with that. Malachi Corley did get a catch for 4 yards last week, so at least he was out there. So he's going to be, he should be active, and maybe they start working him in the offense even more. You never know. He's risky for sure. He's definitely a risk to get absolutely nothing. But he's a total punt play, major savings. So I don't mind him in the flex if you want to get different. Not really seeing anybody else that stands out. Javon Baker. He was active for last week, but he had no targets. So if Javon Baker ends up, if he's active at $300 for the captain, I'm not going to captain him, but so $200 for flex. I think that's a fine punt just to take a shot. I mean, he is a guy who can be a deep threat and he can ball out. He certainly was very good in college. So if he's going to be active, I think having a little bit of exposure to him makes sense. All right, so that is going to do it for me. Just as a recap, my overall stance is I definitely want Breece Hall. I just am going to be less exposed to him in the captain because he's going to be so chalky. I don't want Lazard in the captain. I don't really want him that much in the flex. I think that's going to be a bad chalk play. I much prefer Mike Williams as a pivot in that price range. I love Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is my favorite captain play. If you want me to, plant my flag, Garrett Wilson is my top captain play. So I like him quite a bit. I'm fine with rostering Stevenson. I'm fine with going a little bit overweight on the defenses, mainly the Jets. I'm fine with going a little bit overweight on the kickers, mainly Greg Zierlein. I'm okay with captaining Rodgers, but I prefer him in the flex. All these other Patriots guys, all their wide receivers, Antonio Gibson, their tight ends, they're all viable in the flex. I don't love any of them for the captain. Who's the other? Who's the one other guy that was talking? Oh yeah, Mike Williams and Braylon Allen. Those are my other 2 guys for the Jets that I do like in the captain a little bit. Braylon's ceiling is still kind of curbed by the fact that touchdowns are not predictable. So he did score last week twice, but he only had 8 touches. So his role could keep increasing, but are they really going to increase it like a ton at the expense of Breece Hall? I don't think so. I think that's just kind of like they're spelling Breece Hall more than they had in the past, which is kind of good actually for his efficiency and health. But he probably is going to be a little bit trappy here. Like I can see him getting 5 to 7 touches and like 50 yards because he's an explosive, efficient player. But if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's not going to hit. So I like him for the flex. Okay. But I don't love him for captain. I think you can do it because he's not crazy expensive, but I prefer him at flex. And Mike Williams, I actually think is a really interesting captain play. While Garrett Wilson is my number 1 captain play, Mike Williams is not that far behind because if he's going to actually be owned, or I mean, not owned, but if he's actually going to push like 70% snaps, and people are going to gravitate towards Lazard, and Breece Hall is going to be monster captain chalk, Mike Williams, I mean, that he's a big target, major catch radius, just big dude and get all kinds of balls no matter who's on him. He's a monster, man. So the more games he racks up and further distances himself from that ACL injury, and the more he gets used to Rodgers in the system, Big Mike is going to come out and play. So I would not be shocked at all if that happens against the Patriots. So I really like him. I'd be pretty overweight on him and captain. And if you want to just take it easy and play it safe and slide him in flex, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So let me do a quick build for you. Let's do. Obviously, I'd crunch the system more, but I don't really trust the ownership as it stands. So let's just lock in Garrett Wilson at captain, because I'm pretty cool with that. I'm locking in Breece Hall too. I got no qualms with that. And I think if we're going to play Garrett Wilson, we probably should play Rodgers and bank on a blow-up game. I actually like the Jets defense quite a bit too, so we're kind of not having a ton of money to work with as we go on here. Let's see what makes sense coming down. We could take a punt on Javon Baker or Malachi Corley. I think because they're losing, Javon Baker, as long as he's active, is a pretty darn good punt at 200. That leaves us with $7,300 left. And then I can come back up and get Mike Williams, or I can eat a lot of seller and get Braylon Allen. Or I could play around with any of these other options depending, but based off a price right now and the corner I've worked myself into, I think Mike Williams makes the most sense. So that's kind of like a little bit where my head is at. If you want to get another guy like Rhamondre Stevenson or Jacoby Brissett or whatever, you can flip Mike Williams into the captain, drop Garrett Wilson down, and kind of either go up over the Jets or Javon Baker, however you want to do. This is my strategy for week 3 Thursday Night Football DFS. If I'm building one single entry lineup, I'm going to still run the lineup optimizer and, do my tweaks. I'm going to favor Garrett Wilson, the captain. I'm going to favor these other guys that I like, look at their ownership and then bump it up a bit. And then see what the system spits out. And then if I like that, I might just roll with that or make like one tweak, or I might just go with my hand build because I honestly really like this. So anyways, hopefully that helps you out. Then you get an idea of where I stand on some players. Maybe anything I said helped you kind of solidify where you stand on some players. And you just have a little bit of extra strategy and perhaps an inside track on what projections and ownership look like for week 3. All right, so hopefully that helps. If it does, give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching and good luck.